The bullet was a .45 caliber hollow point, designed to tear through the chest of Lorenzo Moretti, the most feared man in New York City's underworld. It was a hit ordered by the Albanian cartels, executed with military precision on a rainy Tuesday. But physics is a funny thing. It doesn't account for instinct. It doesn't account for a 23-year-old waitress dropping a pot of steaming Arabica coffee and throwing her body in front of a ghost. She didn't know his name. She didn't know he ran the city. She just saw the gun. And when Eleanor Vance took that bullet, she didn't just save a life. She started a war. This is the story of how a waitress bled on a bespoke Brioni suit and stole the heart of the devil. The rain in Tribeca didn't wash the grime away. It just made the neon signs of Le Jardin reflect sharper against the asphalt. Inside, the bistro smelled of garlic butter, expensive Pinot Noir, and damp wool coats. Elena Vance wiped down the mahogany counter of the bar, her eyes scanning the room not out of boredom, but out of habit. She had been working at Le Jardin for 6 months. It was a place where politicians ate with their mistresses and hedge fund managers laundered their guilt with $300 steaks. And then there was Table 9. Every Tuesday at 8:00 p.m. sharp, he came in. The staff called him Mr. Black because they didn't know his real name, and frankly, they were too scared to ask. He wore charcoal suits that cost more than Elena's annual rent. He drank San Pellegrino, no ice. He ate alone. He never looked at his phone. He sat with his back to the wall, watching the door. Elena adjusted her apron. She was tired. Her feet throbbed in her cheap non-slip shoes. She had a tuition payment due for her nursing classes at NYU, and her bank account was currently laughing at her. "Elena, Table 9 needs a refill," the manager, frantic and sweating, whispered as he rushed by. "Don't look him in the eye too long. He's in a mood." Elena grabbed the carafe of water and walked toward the corner booth. As she approached, the man looked up. Lorenzo Moretti. He had eyes like shattered glass, blue, sharp, and cold. He was handsome in a way that felt dangerous, like a wild animal that had been trained to wear a tie. "Sparkling or still?" Elena asked, her voice steady. She didn't tremble. She never did. Growing up in a trailer park in Nevada with a father who liked to throw beer bottles taught you how to read the air pressure in a room. Lorenzo looked at her, really looked at her. Usually people looked through the waitstaff. "Still," he said. His voice was a low rumble, like a luxury car idling. As she poured, Elena felt a prickle on the back of her neck. It was a sensation she hadn't felt in years. The hair on her arm stood up. It was the instinct of a prey animal sensing a shift in the wind. She glanced toward the front window. The rain was lashing against the glass, blurring the street outside. But through the distortion, she saw it. A dark sedan had double-parked across the street, a Lincoln Navigator. The window rolled down just an inch. Most people wouldn't notice. But Eleanor noticed the glint. It wasn't a street light reflecting off a watch. It was the dull, matte finish of a suppressor barrel poking through the gap. Time seemed to slow down. Lorenzo was reaching for his glass. He was relaxed. Too relaxed. Elena didn't think. She didn't calculate the odds. She didn't consider that she was a nobody serving water to a man who probably had a dozen bodyguards outside. The flash from the car window was instantaneous. "Get down!" Elena screamed. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. She dropped the heavy glass carafe. It shattered loudly on the table and lunged. She threw her entire body weight across the table, shoving Lorenzo Moretti hard against the plush leather of the booth. Thwip-crack. The sound of the bullet hitting flesh was sickeningly wet. Elena felt a sledgehammer hit her right shoulder. The force spun her around. She gasped, the air leaving her lungs, as she collapsed onto the expensive Italian suit of the man beneath her. Chaos erupted. The restaurant window shattered a split second later as a second bullet went wide, burying itself in the plaster wall where Lorenzo's head had been. Screams filled the air. Patrons dove under tables. Lorenzo Moretti, the capo of the Moretti crime family, lay pinned in the booth, staring up. But he wasn't looking at the window. He was looking at the woman draped over him. Warm, dark blood was soaking into his white shirt. It wasn't his. "You," Lorenzo hissed, his eyes widening in genuine shock. He shoved her off him, but not roughly. He moved with terrifying speed. He pulled a handgun, a custom Sig Sauer, from inside his jacket before he even stood up. He didn't look at the shooter. He knew his men outside would handle the threat. He looked at Eleanor. She was slumped on the leather seat, clutching her shoulder. Blood was pouring through her fingers, thick and fast. Her face had gone the color of ash. Her eyes were unfocused, staring at the ceiling fan. "Boss! Boss! We're clear! We got the driver!" A massive man in a trench coat, Dante, burst through the front door, gun drawn. Lorenzo ignored him. He holstered his weapon and knelt beside the waitress. He pressed his hand over hers, applying pressure to the wound. "Look at me," Lorenzo commanded. His voice was no longer cold. It was urgent. "What is your name?" "Elena," she stammered, her teeth chattering. Shock was setting in. "Did I spill the water?" Lorenzo let out a sharp, disbelief-filled breath. "Forget the water. Dante, bring the car around, not the ambulance, the Audi." "Boss, the cops are 2 minutes out," Dante warned. "We can't be here." "I said bring the car," Lorenzo roared, a sound that silenced the whimpering patrons in the restaurant. "She took a bullet for me. She doesn't die in a public hospital." Lorenzo scooped Elena up in his arms. She was lighter than he expected. Her head lolled against his chest, smearing blood on his lapel. He carried her out into the rain, stepping over the shattered glass, ignoring the sirens wailing in the distance. For the first time in 10 years, Lorenzo Moretti felt something other than icy calculation. He felt debt. And for a Moretti, debt was a heavy thing to carry. Elena woke up to the smell of antiseptic and expensive cologne. She wasn't in a hospital room. The ceiling was too high, adorned with crown molding. The light was soft, coming from a vintage brass lamp, not the harsh fluorescent buzzing of an ER. She tried to move, but a fire ignited in her upper right chest. She gasped, squeezing her eyes shut. "Don't move! You'll tear the sutures!" The voice came from the corner of the room. Elena forced her eyes open. She was lying in a massive bed with high thread count sheets. An IV drip stand was set up next to the bed, the clear tube snaking into her arm. Lorenzo Moretti sat in a velvet armchair in the shadows. He had changed his clothes. He was wearing a black turtleneck and dark slacks. He looked like he hadn't slept, but his posture was rigid, watchful. "Where am I?" Elena rasped. Her throat felt like sandpaper. Lorenzo stood up and walked to the bedside. He poured a glass of water from a crystal pitcher and held it to her lips. She drank greedily. "You are in my home, in Long Island," Lorenzo said. "You were shot. The bullet clipped your subclavian artery. You lost 3 pints of blood. My private surgeon, Dr. Aris, stitched you up. If we had waited for an ambulance, you would be dead." Eleanor lowered her head back onto the pillow. The memories flooded back. The rain, the gun, the decision to jump. "Why?" Lorenzo asked. It wasn't a thank you. It was an interrogation. Elena blinked. "Why what? Why did you do it?" Lorenzo leaned in, his hands resting on the bed frame. "You're a waitress, making minimum wage plus tips. I'm a stranger. You saw a gun, and instead of ducking, you acted as a human shield. Normal people don't do that, Elena. Soldiers do that. Secret Service agents do that. Waitresses run. Elena looked away, staring at the IV bag. I reacted. I saw it before you did. That's another thing, Lorenzo said, his voice dropping an octave. I have trained myself for 15 years to see threats. I didn't see him. You did. Who are you? I told you. I'm Elena Vance. I know, Lorenzo said. He pulled a manila folder from under his arm and tossed it onto the bed, careful not to hit her legs. Elena Vance, born in Reno, Nevada. Mother died when you were 6. Father, a heavy drinker, worked construction. You left home at 16. No record of you until you popped up in New York 2 years ago. No social media, no credit cards. You pay cash for everything. You live in a basement apartment in Queens. Elena felt a chill that had nothing to do with blood loss. You investigated me? I investigate everyone who gets close to me, especially the ones who save my life. Lorenzo walked to the window, looking out at the sprawling grounds of his estate. Dr. Aris said something interesting while he was operating on you. He said you have scarring on your back, old scars, belt buckles, cigarette burns. Elena pulled the sheet up higher, her face flushing with shame and anger. That's none of your business. It tells me you know pain, Lorenzo said, turning back to her. It tells me you know how to survive. But it doesn't explain the reflexes. He walked back to the chair and sat down. You are going to stay here until you are healed. The men who tried to kill me, they saw you. You are a witness, and now you are a loose end to them. If you go back to your apartment, you will be dead in 24 hours. I can't stay here, Elena panicked. I have a job. I have nursing school. I bought the building your restaurant is in this morning, Lorenzo said calmly. Your job is secure. As for nursing school, consider this a sabbatical. I will cover your tuition. Elena stared at him, mouth agape. You bought the building? It was the easiest way to get the security footage without a warrant. He shrugged, as if buying real estate was like buying a pack of gum. Listen, Mr. Moretti, she said, testing the name she had heard on the news. Enzo, he corrected. Call me Enzo. Enzo, I appreciate you saving me, after I saved you. But I don't belong in this world. I know who you are. I know what you are. Enzo's eyes darkened. He stepped closer, his face inches from hers. The air between them crackled with a strange, terrified electricity. You are in this world now, Elena. You bought a ticket the moment you took that bullet. The people who want me dead are ruthless. The Albanian syndicate, the Krasniki family, they don't leave witnesses. He reached out and gently brushed a stray hair away from her forehead. His touch was surprisingly warm. You saved the king, Enzo whispered. Now the king has to keep you safe, whether you like it or not. Suddenly, the heavy oak door to the bedroom burst open. Dante, the massive bodyguard, stood there, looking flushed. Enzo, we have a problem. Enzo didn't look away from Elena. I'm busy. It's the shooter, Dante said, his voice grim. We interrogated the driver we caught. He didn't give up a name, but he gave us a location. He said the hit wasn't just about territory. Enzo finally turned. What was it about? Dante glanced at Elena, then back to his boss. He said someone inside the family gave them the time and place. They knew you'd be at table 9. They knew the layout. The room went deadly silent. Enzo's face hardened into stone. A traitor. Someone close to him. He looked back at Elena. His suspicion returned, sharper than before. Who told you to work Tuesday night, Elena? What? Did you swap shifts? Enzo asked, his voice lethal. Did someone ask you to be at that specific table? No, it was my regular shift, Elena cried out, wincing at the pain in her shoulder. "I've worked Tuesdays for months." Enzo studied her face for a long, agonizing minute. He was looking for a lie, a tick, a tremor. He saw only pain and fear. "Dante," Enzo said, not breaking eye contact with her. "Double the guard on the perimeter. No one comes in or out. And get the tech team to scrub Elena's apartment before the Albanians get there. If she has any secrets, I want to find them before they do." He turned to leave the room. "Wait!" Elena called out. Enzo paused at the door. "You're wrong," she said, her voice weak but defiant. "I'm not the spy. But if there is a mole, they're going to try again. And next time, I won't be there to jump in front of you." Enzo looked at her, a strange flicker of respect in his eyes. "Then I guess I better make sure you heal quickly." He closed the door, leaving her alone in the silence of the mansion. Elena sank back into the pillows. She looked at her hands. They were shaking. She hadn't told him everything. She hadn't told him about the phone call she received 3 days ago. She hadn't told him that she recognized the tattoo on the shooter's wrist as the car sped away. She wasn't just a waitress, and Enzo Moretti was about to find out that saving him was the easy part. Surviving the truth would be much harder. 3 days passed. The mansion was a fortress, but to Elena it felt more like a mausoleum. The silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic pacing of guards in the hallway and the distant hum of the estate's security servers. Her shoulder was healing. Dr. Aris was impressed by her resilience. "You have high pain tolerance," he had said, while changing her dressing. "Most people would be on morphine. You're taking Tylenol." Elena didn't tell him that pain was an old friend. She didn't tell him that when she was 12, she had broken her arm falling off a dirt bike while running from her father's temper. And she hadn't cried then, either. By the 4th evening, cabin fever set in. Enzo had been absent, locked in his study, managing the fallout of the assassination attempt. Elena, wearing a silk robe that the housekeeper, Maria, had provided, slipped out of her room. She wasn't trying to escape. She just needed to breathe air that didn't smell of disinfectant. She wandered down the grand staircase, her bare feet silent on the marble. The house was a museum of wealth, Renaissance paintings, Ming vases, things that cost more than her entire life's earnings. But she noticed something else. She noticed the sight lines. She noticed that the heavy velvet drapes in the foyer were drawn, but there was a 2-inch gap on the left side. A sniper from the tree line 300 yards away could put a bullet through that gap and hit anyone standing at the bottom of the stairs. She noticed the guard at the back terrace was checking his phone every 45 seconds. A predictable pattern. A fatal pattern. She found herself in the kitchen. It was empty, save for the stainless steel appliances gleaming in the moonlight. She poured herself a glass of water. "You shouldn't be wandering." The voice came from the shadows of the pantry. It was Dante. The massive head of security stepped into the light, his hand resting casually near the holster on his hip. He didn't like her. She could feel it. To him, she was a security risk, a liability. "I was thirsty," Elena said, leaning against the island. She didn't flinch under his glare. "There is water in your room," Dante growled. "Go back upstairs. The boss doesn't need you roaming around tripping alarms." Elena set the glass down. She looked at Dante, her eyes narrowing slightly. "Your guy on the terrace," she said softly. "The one with the scar on his chin." Dante frowned. "Marco. What about him?" "He has a tell. He checks his phone every 45 seconds. And when he does, he looks down for exactly 3 seconds. That's a 3-second blind spot, 10 times an hour. If the Krasnicki family sends a team, that's where they'll breach." Dante stiffened. "Marco is one of my best men." He's bored, Elena countered. And complacency kills. Also the drapes in the foyer. Close the gap. A .338 Lapua Magnum round travels fast, Dante. You won't hear the shot until Enzo is already dead. Dante stared at her, his mouth slightly open. The waitress persona melted away for a second, replaced by something colder, sharper. How do you know about sniper calibers? How do you know about breech patterns? Elena realized she had said too much. The painkillers had loosened her tongue. I watch a lot of movies, she lied, but the lie was thin. Who are you, really? Dante took a step closer, his intimidation tactics in full swing. Waitresses don't analyze security perimeters. Leave her alone, Dante. Enzo stood in the doorway of the kitchen. He was in his shirt sleeves, his tie undone, holding a tumbler of amber liquid. He looked exhausted, the weight of his empire pressing down on his shoulders. Boss, she's critiquing the grid, Dante argued, gesturing at Elena. She knows things she shouldn't. She's right about Marco, Enzo said, taking a sip of his drink. I watched him on the monitors an hour ago. Fire him, or reassign him to the warehouse. I don't want him guarding this house. Dante looked between Enzo and Elena, his jaw tight. Yes, boss. He turned and marched out, casting one last suspicious look at Elena. Enzo walked into the kitchen and leaned against the counter opposite her. The tension in the room shifted. It wasn't hostile anymore. It was heavy with unanswered questions. You have a good eye, Enzo said. I just pay attention, Elena murmured, pulling her robe tighter. It's more than that. Enzo swirled his drink. My men are trained killers. You spotted a flaw they missed. Why? Elena looked down at the granite countertop. She debated lying again. But Enzo Moretti wasn't a man you could lie to easily. He smelled deceit, like a shark smells blood. My father, she said quietly. He wasn't a good man. He was paranoid. He owed money to bad people in Nevada. He taught me to watch the windows. He taught me that if you sit with your back to the door, you're asking to die. I learned to scan rooms before I learned long division. Enzo studied her. The revelation softened his gaze, but only slightly. It explained the instincts, the flinch response, the scars Dr. Orris had mentioned. She was a survivor of a different kind of war, a domestic one. I'm sorry, Enzo said. It was rare for him to apologize. Don't be, Elena shrugged, wincing as the movement pulled at her stitches. It kept me alive on Tuesday. It kept us alive, Enzo corrected. He stepped closer. The smell of whiskey and sandalwood surrounded her. He reached out, his fingers hovering near her wounded shoulder, not touching, just acknowledging the injury. Why do you hate the silence? He asked. What? You came down here because the silence upstairs was too loud. I know the feeling, Enzo said. His voice was low, intimate. When the noise stops, the memories start. Elena looked up into his eyes. For a moment, he wasn't the Mafia boss. He was just a man who was lonely in a castle full of guards. What do you remember, Enzo? She whispered. Every mistake, he replied. Every person I couldn't save. He looked at her intensely. I won't add you to that list, Elena. The moment hung in the air, fragile and charged. Elena felt a pull toward him, a magnetic gravity that terrified her. This was the most dangerous man in New York. And yet, standing in his kitchen at 2:00 a.m., she felt safer than she had in her entire life. Go to bed, Elena, Enzo said abruptly, pulling back. The mask of the Don slid back into place. Tomorrow is going to be a long day. I have a meeting with the commission, and you need to rest. He turned and left her there. But as he walked away, Elena saw his hand tremble slightly. Just once, she returned to her room, but sleep didn't come. She lay in the dark, thinking about the tattoo she had seen on the shooter's wrist, a black scorpion. She hadn't told Enzo, because she knew that scorpion. It wasn't Albanian. It wasn't the Krasniki cartel. It was the insignia of the Desert Kings, a biker gang that ran guns out of Reno, the gang her father worked for. The past hadn't just caught up to her. It had tracked her across the country, and now it was aiming a gun at the man she was starting to care for. 2 weeks into her recovery, Elena was strong enough to walk the grounds. Enzo's estate was breathtaking. Behind the main house lay acres of manicured gardens, hidden from the road by high stone walls and dense forest. It was a gilded cage, beautiful and isolating. Enzo had been distant since the kitchen encounter, buried in meetings. Dante watched Eleanor like a hawk, tracking her every movement. One afternoon, Eleanor was sitting on a stone bench in the rose garden, reading a book she had pulled from the library. The autumn sun was warm, contrasting with the chill in the air. "It's Jane Austen," a voice said. Eleanor looked up. Enzo was walking toward her along the gravel path. He wasn't wearing a suit jacket today, just a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that were strong and corded with muscle. He looked less like a king and more like a warrior at rest. "Persuasion," Elena said, holding up the book. It seemed appropriate. Second chances, regrets. Enzo sat down next to her. Not too close, but close enough that she could feel his body heat. "Do you believe in second chances, Elena?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I think people are who they are. They just get better at hiding it." Enzo chuckled, a dry sound. "A cynic. I wouldn't have pegged you for one." "Waitressing teaches you a lot about human nature," she said. "You see the best and the worst of people when they're hungry or drunk." "And what do you see in me?" Enzo asked. He turned to face her, his blue eyes searching hers. Elena paused. She traced the cover of the book with her finger. "I see a man who is tired of being the villain." Enzo went still. It was as if she had reached into his chest and squeezed his heart. "Careful, Elena. You might find something you don't like." "I've seen the news, Enzo. I know what they say about the Moretti family. Racketeering, gambling, violence." She looked at him directly. "But I also saw you holding my hand when I was bleeding out on a tablecloth. A monster wouldn't have stopped the car. A monster would have let me die to save himself time." Enzo looked away, staring at a blooming white gardenia. "My father was the monster," he said quietly. "He built this empire on fear. When he died, I took over. Not because I wanted the power, but because if I didn't, the city would have burned. The other families, they have no code, no rules. I try to keep order in chaos." He reached out and plucked the gardenia, twirling it in his fingers. "But sometimes," he continued, "keeping order requires doing terrible things, and the blood never really washes off." He handed her the flower. Their fingers brushed. The contact sent a jolt of electricity through Elena. She took the flower, her breath catching in her throat. "You're shaking," Enzo noted softly. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Of me?" "No," she said, surprising herself. "Of what happens next, when I heal, when the danger is over. I go back to serving coffee, and you go back to running the city. We're from different planets, Enzo." Enzo moved then. He reached out and cupped her face in his hand. His skin was rough, calloused from years of handling weapons, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "Planets collide," he murmured. He leaned in. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch. His lips met hers. It wasn't a tentative kiss. It was hungry, desperate, possessing. It tasted of danger and longing. Elena wrapped her good arm around his neck, pulling him closer. For a moment, the world outside, the hitmen, the FBI, the debts, disappeared. There was only the scent of gardenias and the heat of Enzo Moretti. He broke the kiss, resting his forehead against hers, both of them breathing heavily. "I can't let you go back," Enzo whispered roughly. "Not to the bistro, not to that basement apartment. You belong here." "Enzo, I can't be a kept woman," Elena protested weakly. "Not kept," he said fiercely. "Protected by my side." Before she could answer, the peace shattered. A loud crack echoed from the tree line. Instinct took over before thought. Enzo tackled Elena, driving her off the bench and onto the gravel behind the stone fountain. Ping! A bullet chipped the stone of the fountain, right where Elena's head had been a second ago. "Stay down!" Enzo roared, his romantic demeanor vanishing instantly, replaced by the warlord. He drew his gun from the small of his back in one fluid motion. "Dante, Sector 4, we're under fire!" Enzo yelled into his lapel mic. He covered Elena's body with his own. "Are you hit?" he demanded, scanning her frantically. "No," she gasped, dirt on her cheek. "Enzo, that was a rifle." "I know." He peered around the edge of the fountain. They found a gap in the wall. Gunfire erupted from the house as the security team returned fire toward the forest. Sirens began to wail. Enzo grabbed Elena's arm. "We have to move. The fountain won't hold against high-caliber rounds. On my count, we run for the greenhouse. 3, 2, 1, go!" They scrambled across the lawn, bullets kicking up dirt at their heels. They crashed into the glass greenhouse, shards of glass flying as a stray bullet shattered a pane. Enzo pushed her behind a heavy concrete planter. He was breathing hard, checking the magazine of his Sig Sauer. "They shouldn't have been able to get this close," Enzo growled, his eyes wild with rage. "How did they know the rotation? I changed it this morning." Elena felt a cold pit in her stomach. The shooter knew the layout. The shooter knew the schedule. "Enzo," she said, her voice trembling. "It's not just a mole." "What?" "It's someone who knows you." Enzo looked at her, confusion and adrenaline warring in his eyes. Suddenly, Dante's voice crackled over the radio on Enzo's belt. "Boss, we got him. Snipers took him out. Target is down. But, boss, you need to see this." "Is it safe?" Enzo barked. "Perimeter is secure, but the shooter, he has something on him." Enzo helped Elena up. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Stay close to me." They walked out of the greenhouse. Security guards were swarming the lawn. Near the tree line, a body lay crumpled in the grass, dressed in camouflage. Dante was standing over the body, holding a sniper rifle. He looked up as Enzo and Elena approached. Dante's expression was unreadable. "Turn him over," Enzo commanded. One of the guards kicked the body over. Elena gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. The blood drained from her face, leaving her ghostly white. She knew him. It wasn't a random Albanian hitman. It was a man with a jagged scar running down his cheek. A man she hadn't seen in 7 years. "You know him," Enzo said. It wasn't a question. He saw the recognition in her eyes. He saw the horror. Elena couldn't speak. She felt the world tilting. "Elena," Enzo's voice dropped, dangerous and low. "Who is he?" "That's my brother," she whispered. "Caleb." The silence that followed was louder than the gunshot. Enzo stepped back from her as if she were radioactive. The tenderness from the garden was gone, incinerated in a split second. "Your brother," Enzo repeated. He looked at the dead man, then at the woman he had just kissed. "Your brother just tried to put a bullet in my head." "I didn't know," Elena cried, tears spilling over. "I swear, Enzo, I haven't spoken to him in years. He ran with my father's crew." "Dante," Enzo said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Check the shooter's pockets." Dante crouched down and pulled a cell phone from the dead man's tactical vest. He tapped the screen. It was unlocked. "Boss," Dante said, standing up and holding the phone out. "Last call made 10 minutes ago." Enzo took the phone. He looked at the screen. Then he looked at Elena. His eyes were like ice. "He called you," Enzo said. "What? No!" Elena shook her head frantically. "I don't have my phone. You took it when I got here." "Not your cell," Enzo said. He called the extension in the guest bedroom. "Your bedroom." Elena felt the trap snapping shut around her. She hadn't received a call. But how could she prove it? "Enzo, please," she begged. "I didn't talk to him. Someone is setting me up." Enzo didn't answer. He stared at her for a long moment, a war raging behind his eyes. The lover was dead. The dawn had returned. "Take her," Enzo said to Dante. "Enzo, no." "Take her to the cellar," Enzo commanded, turning his back on her. "And lock the door. If she speaks, gag her." "Enzo!" Elena screamed as 2 guards grabbed her arms. He didn't look back. He walked toward the house, stepping over the gardenia that lay crushed in the dirt, white petals stained with mud. The cellar of the Moretti estate was not a wine cellar. It was a cold, soundproofed room with concrete walls and a single metal table. It was where enemies of the family spent their final hours. Elena sat on a metal chair, her hands zip-tied in front of her. She was shivering. Her shoulder throbbed with a dull, sickening ache. She had been there for hours. No water, no food. Just the humming of the ventilation system. She replayed the events in her mind. Caleb, her brother, dead. She felt a wave of grief, but it was complicated. Caleb had been their father's favorite, the one who embraced the violence while Elena ran from it. But to see him dead, and to know he died trying to kill the man she was falling for? The door clanked open. Enzo walked in. He had changed. He wore a black suit now, perfectly tailored. He looked impeccable, untouched by the chaos of the afternoon. But his eyes were red-rimmed. He didn't sit. He paced around the table like a predator circling prey. "I gave you everything," Enzo said softly. "My home, my protection, my trust." "I didn't betray you," Elena said, her voice steady despite her fear. Enzo slammed a file onto the table. "Don't lie to me, not here, not now." The file slid across the metal surface. It was red. "Dante did some digging," Enzo hissed. "Deep digging. We found your father, Frank the Hammer. Vance, enforcer for the Desert Kings, a man who moves heroin and guns for the cartels, including the Albanians." Enzo leaned in, his hand slamming onto the table, shaking it. "Your father is in business with the people who want me dead. And you, his daughter, just happened to be at the restaurant where they try to kill me. You just happened to save me, earning a spot in my house. It's the perfect Trojan horse." "I ran away from him," Elena shouted back. "I hate him. I changed my name. I came to New York to escape that life." "Then why did your brother call your room 10 minutes before taking the shot?" Enzo roared. "Was he confirming position? Giving you a heads up to duck?" "I didn't answer that phone. Check the logs. It rang, but I didn't pick up." "The logs show a connection for 30 seconds, Enzo said coldly. Elena froze. "That's impossible. Unless what? Unless someone else answered it," she realized. Someone else in the house. Someone who diverted the call to make it look like me. Enzo laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "So now we're back to the invisible mole. You're desperate, Elena." He pulled a knife from his belt, a jagged combat knife. Elena flinched, pressing herself back against the chair. Enzo didn't attack her. He stabbed the knife into the table, the blade quivering inches from her hand. "You have one chance," Enzo said. "Tell me the truth. Tell me you set me up. Tell me where your father is hiding. If you confess, I'll make it quick. I'll let you leave the city. But if you lie to me again—" "I love you," Elena blurted out. The room went silent. Enzo stared at her, stunned. "I think I love you," she repeated, tears streaming down her face. "And I would never hurt you. I took a bullet for you, Enzo. Doesn't that count for anything? I bled for you." "People bleed for money all the time," Enzo said, but his voice wavered. The armor was cracking. "Look at the tattoo," Elena said rapidly. "On Caleb's wrist, the scorpion. It has a number under it. 88. That's the year my father started the chapter. If Caleb was here, he wasn't working for the Albanians. The Albanians hate bikers. They don't mix." Enzo frowned. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying this isn't a hit for territory. This is personal. My father wants me back. He sent Caleb to kill you because you have me. And whoever let Caleb onto the property, whoever answered that phone, they aren't working for the Albanians either. They are working for themselves." Enzo pulled the knife out of the table. He studied her face. He wanted to believe her. Every fiber of his being wanted to believe her. But a Don who trusts too easily is a dead Don. "Dante!" Enzo yelled. The door opened. Dante stepped in. "Bring me the phone logs again," Enzo ordered, "and bring me the audio recordings from the guest wing hallway." Dante hesitated. "Boss, the hallway mics have been down for maintenance since Tuesday." Enzo's head snapped up. "Maintenance? Who authorized maintenance?" Dante shifted his weight. "You did, boss. The work order had your digital signature." "I signed no such order," Enzo said slowly. The atmosphere in the room shifted from interrogation to realization. Enzo looked at Dante. Really looked at him. He looked at the Rolex on Dante's wrist, a watch that cost more than Dante's yearly salary. He looked at the sweat beading on Dante's forehead, despite the cool cellar air. "Dante," Enzo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "Why did you suggest we check the shooter's phone? You went straight for his pocket. You didn't secure the perimeter first. You went for the phone." "I was looking for intel, boss," Dante stammered. "And the gap in the drapes," Elena piped up, her eyes locked on the security chief. "You argued when I told you to close it. You wanted that sight line open." Enzo turned fully toward his head of security. The knife was still in his hand. "Dante," Enzo whispered, "tell me you didn't sell me out to a biker gang for a Rolex." Dante's hand moved toward his gun, but Enzo was faster. The air in the cellar changed instantly. It went from the cold staleness of an interrogation room to the electric charge of a kill box. Dante's hand was fast, flying toward the Glock 19 holstered at his hip. He was a big man, 6'4" of muscle and bad intentions, a man who had stood by Enzo's side for a decade. But speed is not just about muscle, it is about hesitation. Dante hesitated. He had a split second of guilt, a micro moment where he remembered the times Enzo had paid his mother's medical bills. Enzo Moretti did not hesitate. Before Dante's fingers could wrap around the polymer grip of his weapon, Enzo lunged. He didn't use the knife. He used the element of surprise. He slammed his shoulder into Dante's chest, driving the larger man back into the concrete wall with a bone-jarring thud. The impact knocked the wind out of Dante. His gun clattered to the floor, sliding under the metal table. "Why?" Enzo roared, burying his fist into Dante's stomach. Then an uppercut to the jaw that sounded like a dry branch snapping. "I treated you like a brother." Dante spat blood, stumbling back but staying on his feet. He was a brawler, and the pain seemed to wake him up. He swung a massive haymaker, catching Enzo on the temple. Enzo staggered, vision blurring. "You're soft, Enzo," Dante yelled, his voice thick with blood and rage. "You let a waitress turn your head. You're making peace treaties while the other families are eating off our plate. Frank Vance, he offered me the Bronx. All I had to do was open the door." "Frank Vance is a corpse walking," Enzo growled. He shook his head to clear the dizziness and assumed a fighting stance. Elena, still zip-tied to the chair, watched in horror. She saw the gun under the table. She began to rock the chair, inching it across the concrete floor, scraping metal against stone. Dante charged Enzo like a bull. He grabbed Enzo by the throat, slamming him onto the interrogation table. The metal groaned under their combined weight. Dante's thumbs dug into Enzo's windpipe, cutting off the air. Enzo clawed at Dante's face, his eyes bulging. "She dies first," Dante hissed, looking over Enzo's shoulder at Elena. "Then you." Elena didn't scream. She didn't beg. She threw her weight backward, tipping the heavy metal chair over. She crashed to the floor hard, pain exploding in her healing shoulder, but she landed right where she needed to be. Her bound hands fumbled blindly on the cold floor. Her fingers brushed the cold steel of the Glock. "Enzo!" she screamed. Enzo heard her. He couldn't breathe, black spots dancing in his vision. But he saw her plan. He drove his knee up, hard, into Dante's groin. Dante howled, his grip loosening just enough. Enzo rolled off the table, gasping for air. Elena twisted her body, gripping the gun with her zip-tied hands. It was awkward, clumsy. She couldn't aim properly, but she didn't need to shoot Dante. She needed to free herself. She aimed the barrel at the chain linking the handcuffs on her wrists. It was a crazy shot, a 1 in a million risk. If she missed, she'd blow her own hands off. Bang! The sound was deafening in the small room. Sparks flew. The chain shattered. Elena's hands flew apart, stinging and burnt, but free. Dante turned, eyes wide. He saw the waitress, the girl he thought was nothing, rising from the floor, the Glock leveled at his chest. "Stay down," Elena said, her voice trembling but her aim true. Dante sneered. "You won't shoot. You're not a killer." He took a step toward her. Elena didn't blink. She squeezed the trigger. Bang! The bullet took Dante in the thigh. He screamed and collapsed, clutching his leg. It wasn't a kill shot. It was a neutralizing shot, a nurse's shot. She knew exactly where the femoral artery was, and she missed it on purpose. Enzo stood up, rubbing his bruised throat. He looked at Dante, writhing on the floor, then at Elena. He walked over to her and gently took the gun from her shaking hands. "I would have aimed for the head," Enzo said quietly. "I'm not you," Elena whispered. Suddenly the lights in the cellar died. The emergency red mood lighting flickered on. A siren began to wail throughout the house, a high-pitched, rhythmic screech that signaled a perimeter breach. "They're here," Enzo said, checking the magazine of the Glock. "Frank didn't just send a sniper. That was the opening act. He's storming the castle." He grabbed Elena's hand. "Can you run?" "I can run," she said. "Good. We need to get to the armory. It's on the 2nd floor." "Why not the exit?" "Because," Enzo said, pulling her toward the door, "there are probably 20 men between us and the gate. We don't run from this, Elena. We end it." They burst out of the cellar into the main hallway. The house was a war zone. The beautiful windows were shattered. Gunfire echoed from the foyer. Enzo's loyal guards were engaging a strike team, dressed in black tactical gear. "Move!" Enzo pushed Elena behind a marble pillar as a spray of automatic fire chipped away the stone inches from her face. "Those aren't typical hitmen," Elena yelled over the noise. "They're moving in a diamond formation. That's military." "Ex-military," Enzo corrected, returning fire with 2 controlled shots, dropping an attacker on the stairs. "Mercenaries. Your father paid top dollar. They moved through the chaos, moving from cover to cover. The smell of cordite and drywall dust was choking. Bodies lay on the Persian rugs, some in suits, some in tactical gear. They reached the library. Enzo kicked the door open and shoved a heavy oak desk against it. "We're trapped," Elena said, looking around. The library had floor-to-ceiling windows, all exposed. "Not trapped," Enzo said. He walked to a bookshelf filled with leather-bound classics. He pulled a copy of The Divine Comedy. The bookshelf clicked and swung open, revealing a hidden room. Inside, walls were lined with rifles, shotguns, and body armor. It was enough firepower to overthrow a small country. Enzo grabbed an AR-15 and tossed a Kevlar vest to Eleanor. "Put this on." Eleanor strapped the vest tight. It pressed painfully against her shoulder wound, but she ignored it. She grabbed a shotgun, a Remington 870. The weight of it felt familiar. It felt like the desert. It felt like the nights she sat on the porch in Reno, waiting for her father to come home, drunk and violent. "Elena," Enzo said. He was loading magazines, his face grim. "If they get through, if I go down—" "Don't!" She stopped him. "You need to know," Enzo pressed. "There is a tunnel. Behind the wine rack in the cellar. It leads to the boathouse. If I fall, you run. You don't look back. Do you understand?" Elena walked up to him. She grabbed the lapels of his ruined suit jacket and pulled him down for a kiss. It was fierce, tasting of blood and dust. "I am done running, Enzo," she said, pulling back, her eyes burning with a fire he had never seen before. "My father has chased me my whole life. Tonight he stops." Enzo looked at her with a mixture of awe and terror. He realized then that he hadn't just saved a waitress, he had saved a queen. "Okay," Enzo nodded. He racked the slide of his rifle. "Then let's go say hello to your father." The grand foyer was a ruin of shattered crystal and drywall. Silence fell over the estate, heavy and suffocating. "Come out, Enzo!" A gravelly voice boomed from the ground floor. "I know you're up there. The rats always hide in the attic." Elena froze. She knew that voice. It was the sound of her childhood nightmares. Frank the Hammer. Vance stepped into the light of the ruined entrance, flanked by 6 heavily armed mercenaries. He held a massive revolver at his side. "I don't want you, Moretti," Frank shouted. "Give me my daughter, and I leave you to bleed out in peace." Enzo stepped out from the shadows of the mezzanine, his rifle leveled. "She's not your daughter, Frank. She's a woman who saved herself from you a long time ago." "She belongs to the kings," Frank raised his gun. "Last chance. Toss her down, or I burn this house to the ground." "She stays," Enzo said firmly. Frank signaled his men. The air exploded with gunfire. Enzo and Elena dove behind the marble balustrade. Bullets chipped away the stone inches from their faces. Enzo popped up, firing controlled bursts that dropped 2 mercenaries, but they were pinned down. Elena saw her opening. She didn't aim at the men. She aimed at the structure. She fired her shotgun at the weakened support beam of the balcony above the entrance. The wood splintered, and the heavy structure collapsed, raining debris and dust onto Frank's men. In the confusion, Enzo and Elena charged down the stairs. The room was a chokehold of dust and violence. Enzo cleared the path, dropping the remaining confused mercenaries. But as the dust settled, Frank Vance emerged. He was bleeding, but he was smiling. He had his revolver pointed directly at Elena. Enzo was too far away. His rifle was empty. "I told you, Ellie," Frank spat, cocking the hammer. "You can't escape family." Frank pulled the trigger. Enzo didn't think. He reacted. He threw himself in front of Eleanor just as the gun went off. Boom! The force of the bullet knocked Enzo backward into Eleanor, and they both crumbled to the floor. "No!" Eleanor screamed, terror ripping through her chest. Frank laughed, limping closer to execute them both. A hero, how cute! He aimed the gun at Enzo's head. "Say goodbye, Moretti." Frank was so focused on his victory, he didn't see Elena move. She didn't reach for a weapon. She grabbed a jagged shard of the shattered crystal chandelier from the floor. With the ferocity of a cornered lioness, she lunged, driving the glass deep into Frank's thigh. Frank roared, his leg buckling. As he fell, Elena snatched the revolver from his hand and pistol-whipped him across the temple. A brutal, solid crack. Frank slumped to the floor, unconscious. She didn't kill him. Death was too easy. He would rot in a cell, stripped of his power. Elena dropped the gun and fell to her knees beside Enzo. "Enzo, look at me!" Enzo coughed, wincing. He tapped his chest. "Vest. Broken ribs." Elena ripped his vest open. A massive bruise bloomed over his heart, but he was alive. She sobbed, burying her face in his neck. "You idiot! You jumped!" Enzo managed a weak smile, stroking her hair. "You jumped first. I had to return the favor." 6 months later, snow fell softly on Manhattan. Inside Le Jardin, the fireplace crackled warmly during a private event. Elena walked through the dining room, radiant in a midnight blue gown. Dante, now the restaurant manager, nodded respectfully as she passed. He leaned on a cane, a permanent reminder of his betrayal and subsequent redemption. Elena slid into the booth at table 9. Enzo was waiting, looking healthy and strong. He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the diamond ring on her finger. "Your father's trial starts next week," Enzo said softly. "Life without parole." "Let him rot," Elena smiled, free of fear. "So," Enzo teased, "is my favorite waitress available for a drink?" Elena laughed, leaning in to kiss him. "The waitress is retired, Enzo, but I think the Queen can squeeze you in." At table 9, the Mafia boss and the woman who saved him raised a glass. They had survived the bullets and the blood, proving that in a world of chaos, the only thing worth fighting for was each other. And that is the story of Elena and Enzo, a reminder that sometimes the bravest heroes don't wear capes or camouflage, they wear aprons. From a deadly Tuesday night shift to the head of a crime family's table, Elena proved that loyalty isn't bought, it's earned in blood. What did you think of Elena's choice? Would you have pulled the trigger on your own family to save the person you loved? Or would you have run the moment you saw the gun? It's a question we all hope we never have to answer. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a daily dose of drama, romance, and thrillers. Share this video with a friend who loves a good Mafia romance. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.